Good evening. Welcome to Facebook Live in our series Eating the Elephant. This is part 12 of our series that talks about Hurricane Michael insurance information and recovery tips. We're talking to you once again from our studios here in what we've now termed downtown Mogadishu, which is in northern Lynn Haven, which was severely damaged in the storm. Lynn Haven and Callaway, I think, took the worst of the storm, and fortunately, we're in pretty good shape personally. I had several questions this week for the first time in quite some time about personally how our family fared, and so I thought I'd open a little bit with that because everybody's got a story, and I thought I'd share a little bit of ours. My father and I. My father lives out here as well in my same neighborhood, along with me and my family, and we fared reasonably well. We're like everyone else. We have blue tarps on our roof, and we have some ceilings that will come down and some carpet that will be pulled out and things like that. But we feel very, very fortunate. We have 2 or 3 homes across the street from us that probably will have bulldozers coming in before too much longer, which had very severe damage to those homes, and those will be total losses. On our office, our agency has 3 locations, one on 30A, one on 23rd Street, and one in Lynn Haven. The Lynn Haven location was blown through and has been closed ever since. It's going to be a total loss or very close to it. And our main location on 23rd Street received very modest damage, and we've been working out of that since right after the storm hit. We still don't have real internet or real phones, but we're limping along like everyone else is, and using cell phones and things like that, and cellular hotspots to get to internet service and get some emails processed. But anyway, again, we feel very, very fortunate to be here and very, very fortunate to have sustained relatively modest damage. But thanks for those of you that have expressed concern and have asked us, and I hope you're all doing well, as just like we are. A couple of things. This morning at church, Father Steve discussed waiting. It's Advent season in the Episcopal Church, which is the period before the Christmas season, where we're all waiting for the birth of Christ. And I'm not going to go off on a religious tangent here, but what he said was very interesting to me, particularly this morning, because we're all waiting. All of us. We're waiting in line at Chick-fil-A. We're waiting in traffic. We're waiting for real internet to come back. We're waiting for contractors. We're waiting for return phone calls from adjusters, and we're waiting for action by our insurance companies. So we're all waiting for something, and we all. I know that I have some issues with patience on occasion, but the point that Father Steve was making, or one of the points he made, was that we're all waiting. So what do we do while we're waiting? And the other question is what will our attitude be while we're waiting? And I think those are 2 very important questions that we all should ask ourselves. I think just because we're waiting doesn't mean we should be waiting with our hands folded neatly in our laps. I think we can still be moving, and we can still be doing an awful lot to advocate for ourselves. And I think our attitude has a great deal to deal with it as well. If you think about it, when you get to the front of the line at Chick-fil-A, the person that is on the other side of that desk is probably just as tired as you are and has been frustrated and has faced the same things that you have. So when you're dealing particularly with service personnel out in the public, I would ask you to give some real thought before you jump on somebody. Now, having said that, if it's insurance people, if it's people that are paid to take care of the problems that you have, if it's your agent, if it's your insurance company, if it's your adjuster, you should advocate and you should be very firm with them. But for the general public, you got to realize that we're all limping along and everybody's got some sort of impairment to their ability to do business normally. So I'm just going to say that if you can develop a little bit more patience, that's probably a good thing. I have a couple of specific pieces of advice tonight regarding that resulted from questions I've gotten during this past week. One that's come up in our office pretty frequently is people with damage to their homes, particularly those that think they have total losses, calling and wanting to cancel their policies. At the moment, we're advising against that, and it's not because we want to keep anybody's money or anything like that, but there are an awful lot of coverage parts that people still need, and immediately canceling your policy may not be your best choice. In your particular case, it may be, but you need to have a conversation with your insurance provider first, because there are things such as your liability coverage. You're going to have a construction site at your home, and there's going to be a significant amount of liability associated with that. And the liability coverage that's typically on your homeowner's policy is very broad and covers you anywhere in the world. So if you're in a rental house and your dog that you brought with you happens to bite somebody because they're stressed as well, that's something that would be covered by that liability policy, or the liability portion of your insurance policy. In addition, you've got contents wherever you are. You may have things up in storage somewhere far away from here, and you're also going to have things with you wherever you are as a renter. So you'll need those kinds of coverages too. I'm not necessarily saying that keeping your policy is the best way to do that, but it very well may be. Because if you cancel that policy, what you may have to do is piece together all of these things. You may have to have a renter's policy to cover your contents, your liability, and you have to have separate coverage under a builder's risk policy and under a commercial general liability policy to cover the construction site that your home will be. So just give some thought to that. Hopefully you have a local agent. You can go sit down with them and talk it through with them. The other thing that you can do, even if you don't cancel that policy right now, again, I discourage people from trying to make decisions when they're particularly stressed. You can always go back later and write your insurance company or your agent and say that you'd like to cancel your policy. And what we're finding is our insurance companies have been willing to cancel those policies back to the day after the storm without any question, without any complaint. There are some policies that, if they are a total loss, those policies become what they call fully earned, meaning that if your policy pays out the full policy limit during the policy term, they don't also have to refund the unearned premium. But that's frankly less common than a normal policy, which would give you a pro rata return of premium. I want to also address something that I've posted on, but I wanted to put it as part of this broadcast, is what I'm now calling the Cat 5 urban myth. and I've heard this story dozens and dozens of times, that folks ask me, well, we're trying to get this storm reclassified as a Category 5 storm because if that happens, people have been told that insurance deductibles will be waived outright. It is an urban myth. I've posted the entire story on Facebook with all of the details. This goes back to some stuff that happened in Superstorm Sandy up in New York a couple of years ago. And what's happened is people took to the internet with that information, and it became a little game of telephone for middle school where you start at one end of the room and tell the story to everyone down the line. And by the time you get to the other end of the room, the story just doesn't resemble anything like what it began as. And that's sort of what's happened here, and they've taken that story and simply rolled it forward to Hurricane Michael. Hurricane deductibles can't be waived. There's no legal mechanism to do it. And neither Jimmy Petronas' office or the governor's office has made any public comment about anything that they would attempt to have those deductibles waived. So if you hear anything to the contrary, it's simply false, and it's urban myth. So hopefully this one will finally put a stake in the heart of that one. And if you have any questions, again, if you'll refer to a previous, I've got a fairly long explanation on a Facebook post from either yesterday or today. So take a peek at that, or shoot me a private message, and I'll be glad to provide you with any information on that you want. Sort of the thing I would like to close up this broadcast with, before a couple of details at the very end, is knowing your price. One of the things that's been troubling for a lot of us, and it's been particularly troubling for me, is having contractors come to you and say, we want to see your scope of work that was given to you by the insurance company, that we know may be inadequate and may have errors and may have oversights, and we'll work from that, and then we'll just bill your insurance company anything extra. The absolute refusal to give a price has been very, very troubling. And it's very unusual. If you think about the way we are in our lives, pretty much everything we buy, we know the price. If you go out and buy a car, you know the price. When you go to Chick-fil-A, you know the price. When you go buy a pair of new shoes or a piece of furniture, you know the price before you write the check or swipe that credit card. And this seems to be that one situation that is a complete exception. I would think the other exception is probably medical care. If you go into the emergency room, I don't think anyone, of course, asks the price or asks what it's going to cost. They just assume that the insurance company, again, at the other end of the day, is going to pay a good bit of that bill, and they're going to wrestle with that. When you divorce the people that are paying the bill from the people that are making the decisions, usually the results are not good, and I think this is one of those cases as well. I would encourage you, when you deal with a contractor, have a price in writing from that contractor before you engage them, if it's at all possible. I will confess that I did violate this rule once myself under a good bit of pressure, and it's easy for me to ask you to do things, I need to comply with that same advice. And in one case, I failed, but ever since then, I learned my lesson. Fortunately, it turned out that the contractor I was dealing with, of course, was honorable, and it was just the way they worked. But I have insisted that every contractor that's been to my property since gives me a price for the work they do before they begin and before I sign a contract with them. I would encourage you to do that same thing. And if you get a lot of pushback from your contractor, again, think to yourself, does this make sense? Is there any other situation that I would go into where I would buy something where I didn't know the price? Or would I sign an agreement to buy something where there was no price tag on the page? And I think if you can step back from the process a little bit and think about it in that way, maybe you'll make a different decision. Hopefully you'll make a better decision, and that's the biggest thing that we want you to do here. I want to close with sort of what's become our mantra. You need to educate, advocate, escalate, and mediate. You need to educate yourself by doing things like watching this broadcast, like looking for information on your own. Google is very effective. Again, if you can do things such as verifying referrals, which we talked about earlier, looking at your policy, talking with your agent, asking people that are more familiar with this process to explain things to you, I think you'll have a much better result. Then you will be able to more effectively advocate for yourself. You will be able to call your adjuster, tell them what you expect. You'll know to talk to your agent and how to talk to your agent, and be able to explain to them what you expect them to do. You can get them to escalate this. We know that we can get to supervisors, we can get to claims VPs, we can do other things like that. And the final step in the educate, advocate, escalate, and mediate is mediate. You can call the Department of Insurance and ask for a department mediator, and they have the power to mediate between you and the insurance company, and they'll do it fairly for you. They will be sure that you get what you're entitled to. I am quite convinced, I've been in this industry a very long time, and I'm convinced that people are going to get paid what they are owed. The problem that we've got is I think it's happening too slowly. And so I think the mediation process might help us speed that along. So I would encourage you to use that process. Again, it's free. You don't have to hire an attorney or a PA or even talk to a salesman like me. You can talk to someone in government that their sole job is to help you with your insurance issues. So I would encourage you, again, to call them. You can, of course, text message our help desk. We're going to leave that posted out front. There are insurance company personnel from Tower Hill still in our office and still at John Thompson's office over at St. Andrews Insurance. So you have lots of resources available to you. If any of that is confusing or you didn't quite get any of it, you're welcome to send me a private message, or you're welcome to call my cell phone at 814-7934. You don't have to tell me who you are, and I'll give you the information that I have available to me. We also have begun to develop a pretty good store of contractors that have been reasonably vetted. So people that are having trouble getting people to return their phone calls and show up and keep appointments, things like that, we may have some solutions for you there as well. If you have any questions, shoot them to us so we can answer them for everybody. We'll see you on Wednesday. Have a good week.